Good. Good.
I stopped recording.
I'm recording.
Never mind, please continue.
Great.
Should I start from the top? Or...
Yes.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the December 7th, 2023 regular meeting of San Diego Community Power's Community Advisory Committee. My name is Matthew Vasilakis, the chair of the committee and the representative for the city of San Diego. We welcome members of the public, San Diego Community Power staff, and our community members joining us in person and online today. I want to thank SDCP staff for making this in-person meeting possible and the city of San Diego for accommodating us today. I also want to thank Vice Chair Harris for stepping in and chairing our meeting last month. I will now call the December 7th, 2023 regular meeting of the Community Advisory Committee of San Diego Community Power to order. Joining us today for the first time as our meeting clerk is Deborah Harrington, who will call the roll. Thank you, Deborah. Because we do, do I need to talk about Lauren right now? All right, because we do, I want to note that Member Caceres is joining us virtually today under AB 2449. Member Caceres, could you please state for the record your reason for attending remotely and identifying whether there is anyone 18 or over in the room with you, and if so, your relationship to that person?
Thank you. I am participating in today's meeting remotely under recent amendments to the Brown Act due to a contagious illness that prevents me from participating in person. There is not anyone over or under the age of 18 in this room with me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Deborah, please call the roll.
Councilmember Schofield. Councilmember Sclafani.
Present.
Councilmember Johns. Councilmember Hammond.
Hi, I'm present. You might just note that we aren't council members if you wanted to.
I apologize.
It doesn't matter to me, but just for the records.
Councilmember Hammond. Yes. Committee member Sandoval.
Present.
Committee member Webb. Secretary Caceres.
Present online.
Committee member Castaneda. Committee member Emerson.
Here.
Committee member Price.
Here.
Committee member Anderson.
Anderson present.
Vice Chair Harris.
Present.
Chair Vasilakis.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Excellent. Committee Member Harris, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. We would now like to take a brief moment to provide a land acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we are conducting our meeting is located in the traditional territory of the Kumeyaay people. We recognize the Kumeyaay Nation as the rightful stewards of this land and are committed to learning from and working with local Indigenous communities to honor their sovereignty, respect their cultures, and support their efforts to heal from intergenerational trauma and systemic injustices that continue to impact them today. Thank you to the Kumeyaay Nation and all the original stewards of this land. We look forward to working in collaboration to build a more just, sustainable, and resilient future for all. Wonderful. We will now move on to quorum, special presentations, introductions, non-agenda public comment, and changes to the agenda. With a quorum present, first up on the agenda is special presentations and introductions. I would like to give a warm welcome to Ilian Sandalvo, who joins us today as our newest CAC member representing the city of Imperial Beach. Her nomination was approved by our board of directors during their November meeting last month, and she was sworn in earlier today. Ilian, would you like to address the CAC?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, everybody. Everybody's so welcoming, and I'm so excited to see how we can team together to make things better. Oh, and by the way, it's Ilian
Ilian.
Sandoval.
Sandoval. Thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome. Today, we would also like to give a warm welcome to Isabella Kroll, who is joining us, SDCP staff as the Contract Management Associate. Would you like to introduce yourself?
That's fine.
Hello, good evening to all of you and committee members. Yes, my name is Isabella Kroll. I joined San Diego Community Power about 2.5 weeks ago. Like you said, as the Contracts Management Associate. I have a law degree and I'm an attorney from University of San Diego. And I'm excited to be here to make our community better.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella.
Welcome.
That concludes special presentations for today. We will now take up non-agenda public comment. I want to note that written public comments submitted before the committee meeting are emailed to all CAC members prior to the committee meeting and will be posted on the website at the beginning of the meeting. Deborah, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
We do not have any.
Wonderful. Are there any items to be withdrawn or reordered on the agenda? Nope. All right. Well, then I will move us on to our consent calendar items 1 through 3. As a reminder, the consent calendar contains items that can be approved as a package without discussion unless a CAC member requests that an item be removed for separate discussion and action. The CAC receives staff reports for all items on the consent agenda, and staff provided an opportunity for questions and comments during their briefings prior to this meeting. Today's consent agenda includes 1, approval of the November 9th, 2023 CAC meeting minutes. 2, update on marketing, public relations, and government affairs. And 3, update on customer operations. Deborah, do we have any public comment on any of these items?
We do not have any public comments.
Excellent, thank you. Is there anyone who would like to remove any item from the consent agenda for further discussion? And just note that if someone requests to remove, just acknowledge that for brief discussion, we have quite a packed agenda. So just want to make that note. But anyone want to pull any items? Oh, and I see that committee member Johns has joined us.
And
And Castaneda. There we go. Wonderful. We got a full house. Any consent item polls? All right. Seeing no objections or requests for removal, I will now turn it over to the committee members for a motion.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
second,
Great. So we have a motion by committee member Harris and a second by committee member Anderson. Deborah, please call the vote.
Committee member Schofield. Committee member Sclafani.
aye.
Committee member Johns.
Aye.
Committee member Hammond.
Aye.
Committee member Sandoval.
Aye.
Committee member Webb. Secretary Sclifsaris.
Aye.
Committee member Castaneda.
Aye.
Committee member Anderson.
Aye.
Committee member Price.
Yep.
Committee member Anderson.
I thought that was me before, sorry. Aye. Emerson as aye also.
Thank you. Vice Chair Harris.
Yes.
Chair Vasilakis.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Excellent. That motion passes. Wonderful. We'll now move on to regular agenda item 5, or actually rather 4. Update on regulatory and legislative affairs. I will now turn it over to staff to present on this item. I will ask that before every presentation, staff clearly state their name and title for the record. I'll also ask CAC members to please refrain from asking questions and making comments until the end of the staff presentation. So that'd be very helpful. Deborah, actually, no, staff, thank you so much. Your presentation is ready.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, committee members. My name is Stephen Gunther. I'm Senior Regulatory Analyst at SDCP. Next slide, please. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, next slide, please. So I'll be kicking off our update on regulatory and legislative affairs with a recent proposed decision at the California Public Utilities Commission. Proposed decision would grant a petition for modification on a previous decision that had to do with the modified cost allocation mechanism. Hopefully, some of that will make sense by the end of this presentation. Next slide. So before I get into the proposed decision that would modify the existing decision, let me take a little bit of background on how we got here, what that decision was. So in 2019, the commission ordered load serving entities to procure additional resource adequacy capacity. After that decision, with the growth of CCAs throughout the state, there were many customers who moved from IOU service to a CCA service. So the capacity that was procured on their behalf, those customers were no longer with that IOU. The commission recognized this imbalance that created and issued decision D-22-05-015, which allowed a one-time provision for the CCAs to negotiate the purchase of that capacity on behalf of their new customers at the time of the decision based on that load. And that purchase would be at a market price benchmark. Now, the key timing issue with this is that highlighted in that green box, SDCP and Clean Energy Alliance had planned and approved expansion at the time of the decision. While those customers weren't being served by SDCP at that time, it was planned and filed with the CPUC and approved, so we knew those customers were coming over. In our case, that was the unincorporated county and national city. Slide, please. So keeping that timing in mind, with this one-time provision, the language of the decision stated that it would be based on the load of the non-IOU LSCs as mutually agreed upon between the IOU and CCA as of the effective date of the decision. So our interpretation of that mutually agreed upon load was the 2023 year ahead revised load forecast. As I mentioned, we knew that that national city and the county of San Diego were going to be moving to our service territory. That was filed and approved with the CPUC, and it was agreed upon with SDG&E. They knew those customers were coming. With negotiations with SDG&E, their focus was on the as effective date of this decision in their interpretation. So they felt that they could only negotiate based on the load that we had at the time of the decision, which wouldn't include those new customers. So we were unwilling to reach a negotiation bilaterally with SDG&E. So we jointly with CEA filed a petition to modify the decision that would create the clarifying language so we could base it on the 2023 year ahead load forecast. Next slide, please. So earlier this year, the CPUC issued a decision in which they denied the joint PFM that was filed by SDCP and CEA. And so that proposed decision would deny that petition. We filed opening comments, held several meetings with commission staff, reached out to other policymakers to educate them on the potential negative impact this would have on ratepayers. Specifically, we pointed to the fact that without this modification, customers would be paying twice for the same capacity. They'd be paying basically through the CCA as we would need to buy that replacement RA, but they'd still be paying the excess SDG&E capacity through the power charge and difference adjustment. So through our conservative analysis, over 12 years, this would cost ratepayers at least $100 million over the next 12 years. So the CPUC was scheduled to vote on that proposed decision on October 12th, but luckily our arguments must have resonated with the commission because they withdrew that from the agenda a few days before it was to be voted on. Next slide, please. So that takes us to the current proposed decision that this update is about. On November 9th, the CPUC issued a new proposed decision which reversed their earlier one and would grant the petition that we were asking for. So if adopted, this will allow SDCP, so excuse me, to purchase the additional 36 megawatts of system RA capacity at the market price. And like I mentioned, that's going to save ratepayers tens of millions of dollars. Heard in other presentations, RA prices are very high right now, so that 36 megawatts is a big difference on our ratepayers. So opening comments were filed on this proposed decision in late November. We replied to those on December 4th. And currently, this proposed decision is expected to be voted on December 14th at the next CPUC business meeting. And we are hoping that it is adopted to grant that petition that we asked. So that is the saga of that proceeding. And then my second update is also resource adequacy related, but within a different proceeding. On October 12th, the CPC opened a new order instituting rulemaking. So this is basically the proceeding that oversees the RA program. This is where adjustments to the RA program will be made. And we've worked with our trade association, CalCCA, in November to file opening comments, to reply comments on this new proceeding, to outline what we think are critical issues that should be in scope of the proceeding. So things that we'll be able to litigate over throughout the course of the proceeding. So in those comments, we outlined the current problem, which is simply there's an imbalance in the RA supply and demand, and makes it nearly impossible to procure to meet our RA requirements. And that shortage has led to RA capacity prices at all-time highs. So given those two current problems, CalCCA recommended a variety of issues and what should be prioritized. This list isn't exclusive or comprehensive of all the things that were in those comments, but a few highlights were revisiting the compliance and penalties, including a potential waiver process for system RA, which would allow an LLC to show that we basically acted in good faith effort and did everything we could to procure RA and maybe have those penalties waived. Also resolving issues as the RA framework moves into a new 24-hour slice of day framework, which we outlined in the past. Basically, we would be procuring RA per hour based on our load. And one of the items that we've felt would make this more efficient is because our obligation is hourly, we should be able to trade hourly to make a more efficient process. And then the last issue here is revisiting some import rules with RA. And that is the update there. So this proceeding just opened, so there'll be a lot of further updates in the future. Thank you.
Thanks. Good evening. My name is Aisha and I'm our Senior Policy Manager. Great to be with you all tonight. Tonight I am presenting on the next chapter of the net billing tariff saga. On November 16th, the CPUC adopted a decision that addresses the remaining issues in this proceeding. And so it touches on a few items. It establishes a successor tariff for the virtual net energy metering tariff. It also establishes a successor tariff for the net energy metering aggregation tariff. And it addresses billing improvements, consumer protections, prevailing wage requirements for contractors, principles for evaluating the net billing tariff, and it also closes this proceeding. I'm not going to go through all of these tonight, but I will focus on the key changes for those 3 items in bold. So next slide, please. All right, so I just wanted to provide some background on virtual net energy metering before we get into the changes. So virtual net energy metering, also known as VNEM, is largely utilized by multifamily properties. And it's distinct from net energy metering because the on-site generation doesn't typically flow to tenant meters. It goes directly back to the grid. For this reason, VNEM was created to ensure tenants receive some of the benefits of the building's solar production, as opposed to all of that going to the property owner. And compensation for virtual self-generation is allocated via monthly utility bill credits. That's a mechanism for ensuring tenants get benefits. Next slide, please. All right, so the main goal of this decision as it pertains to VNEM was to align it with the net billing tariff. So now the new name is virtual net billing tariff. And these next few bullets should sound familiar because these are what we saw in the net billing tariff decision. So under VNBT, export compensation will be paid based off of the avoided cost calculator rates. As we know, those are significantly lower than the old export compensation rates prior to NBT being established. It also establishes a glide path. However, SDG&E and non-residential customers aren't eligible for those adders, akin to what was the case under the regular NBT. And then insofar as imports go, residential customers can enroll in any eligible time of use rate, and non-residential customers can enroll in any currently available rate. And this table is just highlighting that indeed there are no adders for SDG&E customers. All right, some other changes that we saw are that there's no netting now, except for residential virtual net billing tariff customers. And for storage, there's a few different provisions. So customers can add storage to their existing system without altering their tariff status. And they can operate their systems, including storage, to serve on-site load during outages. And this third one's pretty exciting. Not the first part, but the second part. Grid charging of on-site batteries is still prohibited currently, but the CPUC decided to establish a process to launch an examination that would change this rule. Next slide, please. So when does the current tariff VNM sunset? That will be on 11:59 p.m. February 13th, 2024. Implementation for the virtual net billing tariff won't begin for a while, March 31st, 2025. And temporary service will be on VNM in the interim between sunset and implementation. And for legacy treatment, the decision that established NBT, the one passed last December, established a 9-year legacy period for anyone who enrolled in VNM after April 15th, 2023. And so those who were taking service under VNM prior to that have a 20-year legacy period. But regardless, the legacy periods will be retained, and a transition to the new tariff will occur when that legacy period sunsets. Next slide, please. All right, the next tariff we're talking about tonight is a net energy metering aggregation tariff. And the two types of customers that largely utilize this tariff are agricultural and municipal customers. Sorry, it's kind of flowing in and out. But this, so NEMA, as it's also known by, benefits a single customer who has multiple meters that are on the same property, adjacent properties, or contiguous properties. Next slide, please. So the changes made to the net energy metering aggregation tariff are largely the ones that were made to VNM. The new name for the successor tariff here is the aggregation subtariff, not the most exciting name. So some of the changes that were made to NEMA that are distinct from those made to VNM are that the aggregation subtariff customers will now receive net surplus compensation if generation exceeds consumption at the end of their relevant period. I'll note that VNM customers did receive the net surplus compensation before. However, under NEMA, those customers didn't receive it, so now they will, which is good news. For imports, residential customers have to enroll in a highly differentiated time of use rate, while non-residential customers can take service on any available time of use rate. And no netting is adopted, but self-consumption will still be counted. This is the same as the net billing tariff. And then the sunset date, legacy period treatment, implementation date, and interim treatment, they're all the same as what I just presented for the virtual net billing tariff. Next slide. All right, this is the last piece of this presentation on the net billing tariff proceeding. So the CPUC recognizes that NEM bills are very complicated and hard for customers to understand. No surprise to this group. And they know that net billing tariff will also be confusing for customers to understand. So they did, in the decision, establish a process, to convene workshops that would look at improvements that can be made. However, they didn't explicitly call out unbundled customer billing issues, which are distinct from those bundled customers C. So SDCP and other CCAs advocated for a change in the decision language to ensure those unbundled customers' needs are vetted in those workshops. So that we went on that, and so the decision language was changed. And those workshops will commence no later than April 13th, 2024. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Laura Fernandez, Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs. I first wanted to talk to you all about the Energy Resource Recovery Account proceeding. This is the proceeding that approves SDG&E's revenue requirement as well as their sales forecast and PCIA rates, just to name a few items that are in this very, very large, important proceeding. We're heavily involved in this proceeding each year because it impacts our ability to compete with SDG&E. We have a team of attorneys as well as the best consultants who closely review SDG&E's work papers, and we engage accordingly. You probably remember we found $100 million errors more than once in this proceeding, so it's a lot of fun. One of the main issues in the proceeding this year was that SDG&E wasn't forecasting their RA sales. And I'll explain in a minute why this matters, but basically on November 27th, we did get the proposed decision in this proceeding. And we did win on that RA sales forecast issue. So SDG&E has been ordered to revise their 2024 RA sales forecast. It's kind of funny because it's called the forecast proceeding and they weren't forecasting how much RA they were going to sell, but now they're going to have to. And that is good news for PCIA because it will be a reduction in cost of $36.7 billion in PCIA rates, and that'll be a benefit to almost entirely CCA customers. And that will show up in rates in January of 2024. This is still a proposed decision, but we don't expect much will change between now and when it gets voted on December 14th. And this is this PCIA, RA sales forecast issue is just a small piece of the overall rates picture. And I'm not going to steal Lucas's thunder because they're going to go there later. So we'll leave ERA there for now and go to the next slide, please. So the last time I presented to you all was back in July. So I want to provide you an update on what ultimately happened this legislative year. I discussed this year earlier, but as a reminder of kind of this first bill, which sucked up most of the oxygen, at least for me, this legislative session. So originally this was actually a budget change proposal that came from the governor's office, the administration, and it would have created a new central procurement process to allow either the Department of Water Resources or the investor-owned utilities to procure resources on behalf of other load-serving entities like CCAs. It would have also created capacity payments that would have sort of been a third stacked penalty on top of penalties that are already paid today. And it would have expanded CPUC jurisdiction over CCA procurement autonomy because we would have been required to do things that we don't do today, like submit bundled procurement plans to CPUC. So the budget change proposals were ultimately put into this policy bill. It was carried by Chair Garcia. Ultimately, the original proposals that I just spoke about didn't make it into the budget that was passed on June 30th. And AB 1373, you might recall, is kind of like, which vehicle is it going to be? And we're, it was a hard thing to lobby because it was kind of like a shell game. We didn't know what was going to happen. But ultimately, they did take up these proposals as a part of the policy bill when they got back from summer recess. And I should note, this is the only bill we opposed this legislative session, and we opposed it basically till the bitter end when we got our final last ask. And I'll get into that in just a second. So the final version of the bill, it did establish a central procurement function, but it is within the Department of Water Resources. As I mentioned, an earlier version would have allowed either the investor utilities or DWR to be in this role. That is something we did not want. The IOUs are our competitors, so we did not want them in that function. And that was kind of our last remaining ask on the bill, kind of, when we were making our meetings rounds. That's like the one thing we were like, please don't have the IOUs in central procurement function. So we were really excited to get that change. And once we got that amendment, we removed our opposition to the bill and we went neutral on the bill. Another concern we had with central procurement is that it would have impeded our ability to procure on behalf of our community. So another really important change that we got to the bill prior to removing our opposition is that we were worried about load serving entities not having the ability to procure on behalf of our own customers. So the final version of the bill gives us a 6-month time frame to fulfill that procurement need prior to being ordered by the central procurement entity. So it kind of like gives us the chance to do the procurement that is deemed necessary by the CPUC and directed by DWR. So we have our chance, which is something that was also really important to us. Another major improvement to the bill is around the capacity payment. So as I kind of touched on before, when it first came out, it was going to be kind of a triple stack penalty. So today, if there is a load serving entity is short RA, you have to pay the RA penalty to the CPUC. And then if CAISO backstops the short, you have to pay those costs as well. And originally this proposal would have said, so you're going to pay a capacity payment to the Strategic Reliability Reserve. So it would have been a third stack penalty. And we did get amendments to the bill that have basically the capacity payment comes out of the penalty. So it's a net, not a stack. So it is ultimately lower cost than it would have been originally. So that was a really good improvement. And then the last part is around IRP jurisdiction. So as I briefly mentioned earlier, an earlier version would have required us to submit our procurement plans to CPUC, which would have been ridiculous. So what basically the final version did is it codified existing practice around IRP today, but it doesn't require us to submit procurement plans to CPUC. So that's good. Next slide, please. So we supported 2 other bills that were ultimately signed into law. One of them is one that was flagged by our general counsel. Thank you very much. Around the Brown Act. Unfortunately, basically it would have allowed us to meet as we did during the COVID emergency, but that bill SB 411 was ultimately amended to be applicable only in a very narrow set of circumstances. So it wouldn't apply to us. So it did pass, but it doesn't apply to us. So that's unfortunate. And then the other bill that passed that we took a support position on was 1850, and that is a bill about interconnection. So fortunately in SDG&E service territory, this isn't a huge issue, but it's actually a really, really big issue up in PG&E service territory. And so this bill basically, it just has some reporting requirements if an IOU is falling behind on interconnection of customer load. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide. These are the bills that we took support positions on that ultimately did not make it through the legislative process. The one on the top, SB 619, that was actually authored by Padilla, who used to be on the SDCP board, and it basically would have allowed utilities to get their CEQA reviews from the CEC instead of the CPUC. That bill ultimately did get vetoed by the governor. And then the other ones just didn't make it to the end of the legislative session. The SB 233, that was about bidirectional charging. That was actually flagged by one of our CAC members. So thank you, Larry. So we took a support position on that. That was a Skinner bill, ultimately did not make it through. SB 547, very similar to the other Brown Act bill. It would have applied to JPAs like SDCP, but did not ultimately get signed into law. And lastly, there was another bill about timely interconnection of customer-sided energy generation that did not get signed into law. So that is all I had. And I'm happy to take questions.
Great, thank you. Deborah, before we take questions from the committee, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Excellent. Well, then I will now turn it over to CAC members for comments. And just as a reminder, each of you will have up to 5 minutes to ask questions and make comments. So I would prioritize what you'd like to ask or say, and then whatever you have left over, feel free to email SDCP staff after. Committee Member Price?
Is one of these things that you was talking about, did we get sued for one of those last year for like $1 million or something?
So I believe you're referring to the RA penalties. So this is not something that we discussed today, but I think you're referring to, I know there was a news article about it a couple of months ago. That's related to the RA penalties that SDCP has previously paid, but that's not something I covered today.
Okay.
Question.
Member Castiglione?
Did we take a position on SB 619, the one that was vetoed by Senator?
Yes, we took a support position.
Member Anderson?
During the various presentations we just heard, most of which I comprehend, you used 2 terms. One is input and another one is export. And can you tell me what it means to those 2 terms mean? Importing from whom to whom and exporting from whom to whom?
Okay.
I think I'm after.
Yeah, so importing would be importing electricity from the grid.
From the grid to whom though?
Oh, to any like the relevant property owner.
Not to San Diego Community Power,
No.
but to individual customers. Gotcha.
Yes.
And how about
And then
export?
exports are when a customer sends energy to the grid.
Got it. Thanks.
Member Jones.
I think this is about 1373. And this one resolution was central procurement. There's a 6-month window. Is that 6 months every year, every fiscal year? Is that
So
I'm just trying to imagine on the calendar, and it seems like we're gonna want to be, going like trying to procure like crazy in that 6 months.
So my understanding of how this works is that, first of all, the central procurement function will only come into play if the CPUC takes a look at all the IRPs that have been submitted by load serving entities and said, we need something is missing. And so then before, like, they basically would give load serving entities a heads up, of, say it's 3,000 megawatts of pumped hydro. They would say, okay, this is what we think the system needs, and now you have 6 months time to get your share of that before we order it to be centrally procured.
Okay.
So it's not gonna be like an every year, I mean, we're hoping that central procurement doesn't come into play very often. It really should only come into play as a backstop to if the load serving entities are not meeting the needs that the CPUC believes are necessary for the system.
And it seems to be a very source dependent, is that for the example you gave?
Can you clarify your question?
What? You said pumped hydro.
Oh, so the central procurement function is intended to be for sort of long lead time resources and resources that we don't see a lot of on the grid today. So like offshore wind, geothermal, and pumped hydro are kind of the resources that were in mind when this bill was being drafted.
Thank you.
Member Emerson.
Somebody,
Oh,
committee, yes, committee member Hammond has requested to speak.
Thank you. I just wanted to note our committee for 2 years discussed net metering. We had urged SDCP to take action. Laura worked and got San Jose Clean Energy to support a letter, but ultimately the CPUC / net metering. There was an article this past week from KPBS talking about how many jobs have been lost locally in San Diego. So just bringing that to all of your attention. And then there is an effort with AB 205 trying to repeal part of it. There's a statewide effort right now, so I'm not sure if SDCP plans to weigh in, but rooftop solar has been slashed. The SOMA proceeding is happening now, but the VNEM was very disappointing to see how solar for cities, schools, farms, and multifamily affordable housing is getting slashed as well. And so just, I guess, part of it is an FYI to those who aren't aware, and then also always urging staff if we can collaborate on advocacy to defend on these things.
There's one.
Oh, yes.
Thanks, Tara. We're also definitely aware of and tracking the potential interest in revisiting AB 205. And I will preview for you all that we have a senior legislative manager starting next week, and he'll be introduced at the board meeting. So we'll have someone hyper focused on these legislative issues, which I'm very excited.
Thank you, Laura.
Member Emerson.
Yes, I have 2 questions. One is on SB 233, but before that, on the aggregation subtariff, there's a 4th bullet that says no netting is adopted, but consumption will be counted akin to NBT. Could you translate that?
Yeah, that probably wasn't worded the best either. So no netting was adopted under net billing tariff, and basically what you had before was longer netting intervals or netting periods. So just to give a simple example, prior to NBT, let's say there was let's say you had a 24-hour interval period. I'm just trying to use a simple example here. And so you produce energy during the day, and then at night, you have higher consumption. And within that 24-hour period, you would net your nighttime use against what you generated during the day. And so that's a big netting period. Once you shrink it down to 15 minutes, let's say, you don't, let's say it's the middle of the day, and you're generating solar, but that's only netted against what you consume for that 15-minute period. So the intention is that it's a more accurate reflection in real time on what your imports and exports are. And so I said no netting, and so the CPUC adopted no netting, to basically shrink down the netting and exporting to as tiny of a slice as possible. And so I think the other part of the question was no netting. And sorry, could you repeat the second part of your question?
Well, it says no netting is adopted, but self-consumption will be counted akin to NBT.
Yeah, so the other part of that, it's actually expanded upon a bit in the staff report. But basically, it's just saying that anything you generate on site will indeed be netted against imports. And so it's really a contrast to the virtual net energy metering tariff, or the virtual net billing tariff, where they were actually entertaining not counting generation on site. Or consumption that's done on site. And so with the aggregation sub tariff, it's just saying that the on-site generation will be counted, and the consumption of that on-site generation will be counted. So it's ideally I would have probably just had a bullet or I would have removed that bullet to eliminate confusion. But I could try to rephrase that if that didn't make sense.
None of this makes sense.
Well, that's,
So let's, maybe I'll ask her offline for more details, but
Sure.
it is a little confusing and it's probably need a concrete example. But the other question was the SB 233, which was not acted on, and maybe you weren't that involved with it, but could you tell me a little bit what you expect on the future related to that, or what was your involvement?
Yeah, this is the first year of a 2-year legislative cycle, so it's possible that the bill gets picked up again next year, and we'll keep you posted.
That's it.
great. Committeemember Price.
Is the net, I'm probably gonna say it wrong, but is the net,
Metering tariff?
the net metering time frame from 24 hours to a smaller slice, like 15 minutes or whatever it was? What is more, I have solar, so what is more beneficial to me? And am I a whatever you call this,
So
on-site generator?
So this actually is, what I presented on tonight isn't for, like single family homes, which I assume you may, live in a single family home. If you lived in an apartment complex or a farmer with numerous properties, those are the changes I was speaking to tonight.
Okay.
But if you're asking for what rate option is better, I would probably pitch that question to someone on our rates team. But Laura, it sounded like you were jumping for the mic. Did you have something to add? No. But yeah, if you're interested in kind of learning what the best option is for you, I'd encourage you to reach out to SDCP after the meeting.
The best option for multifamily residences, apartment buildings, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, within the context of the net billing tariff, or rather, sorry, the virtual net billing tariff, there isn't an option for them. They're just going to be enrolled in this virtual net billing tariff.
But what I'm saying is which one is better, the lengthier time frame or the shorter time frame?
And so those, there isn't an option, but the longer interval period is better than the shorter one. But that I kind of fleshed out that example to show the differences, because before when it was just net energy metering, you had those longer netting periods, which meant you could basically earn more per your exports. And with the shorter netting periods, you're earning less. So the short answer to your question is the longer interval periods are more lucrative for the customer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up to that.
Remember, Asa?
Yeah. So why is there an interval at all? Electricity is a continuous function. It flows from say, my backyard solar onto the grid.
Can we take that question online or offline?
Why would that be?
We just have a really packed agenda and I want to limit time just so we can get.
I think this is pretty quick.
Okay.
Why do we use intervals at all?
I actually would not be the best person to answer that. I see Lucas, so.
Good evening, members of the CAC. My name is Lucas Pluto. I'm the Senior Director of Data Analytics and Customer Operations. That's an excellent question. You're absolutely right that the electrons flow continuously. However, the meter that records the electron flow, they are calibrated to either record the electron flow either in 60-minute intervals or 15-minute intervals. And that is how usage typically gets transmitted for billing purposes down to those intervals.
I got it. I don't think I approve of that, but I got it.
Committee Member Sandoval?
I just have a quick question. So this predictive drop of $36.7 million in RA rates, is that taking into consideration all these new proposed legislations? Or is that before all of that?
Lucas should come back to that. No. So yeah, the energy, the ERA proceeding, there's a whole bunch of inputs into rate. The 36.7 million related to the it's a big number, but frankly, a small win in PCI rates that will be reflected in 2024 rates. And then the legislation is kind of separate, but Lucas is going to give you a more holistic look at rates. So I would wait for that presentation and see if you have a better understanding at that point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Well, I'll close out with some comments. We can move this along. Really appreciate Committee Member Hammond elevating significant job losses we're experiencing in the solar industry. I think that's very concerning, especially since San Diego is so focused on our clean energy economy. So if we can find ways to help mitigate that impact, either through our regulatory and legislative advocacy efforts in Sacramento and San Francisco, that would be great. And also just want to commend the legislative regulatory team for saving us hundreds of millions of dollars over the years. Catching these, I think we have a top-notch and very talented team that's kicking butt up there. So really appreciate that work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. And yeah, I'm glad you caught that. Big $100 million. Come on, don't forget that part.
Wonderful.
The champagne's on ice till December 14th though, but. Thank you.
Great. All right, so moving along. Wonderful. All right. Well, we will now move on to item 5, or do I need to close this out in the formal receiving file? Perfect. Okay. Moving on to item 5, update on local distributed infill plan. I'll turn over to staff to provide the update.
Thank you, committee. Good to see you all. My name is Morgan Adams, Senior Manager of Local Renewable Development, part of the Power Services team at SDCP. It's been a few months since I addressed most of you at our April strategic planning session. And back then I said I would be back now to give an update on our local distributed info plan. So here I am. Next slide. So just to sort of remind us what we're referring to, we have among our 2035 goals as an agency, one of them is to procure 15% of our load through new local infill resources. And so that is sort of what we're talking about here. I won't go into all the benefits of infill projects and sort of as opposed to our transmission level projects, which we need as well. We want to have a portfolio that includes distributed resources as well. So that's why we do this. And I'm excited to be able to work on this exciting initiative. Next slide. Just wanted to sort of illustrate here the breadth of DERs. By DER, I mean distributed energy resources. It's really it includes a lot of things. We don't do this alone in Power Services. We work very closely with our programs team who works on net billing tariffs, demand response programs, a lot of the things that you hear those folks come in and talk about. What I'm here to talk about today is the left side of this slide, wholesale DER procurement. So it's a combination really of different solicitations, feed-in tariffs, and also community solar. And I'm not going to get into community solar in detail tonight, but that's sort of part of that umbrella as well. So next slide, please. Different in mind. That's okay. So this is a further breakdown of the wholesale procurement initiatives that we are sort of working on right now. The first three that you see at the top three, those are things that we already have sort of in motion that we're already working on now. The latter two, we're sort of working on in parallel, but we're really focusing on the first half of next year to get those sort of up to speed. So the next two slides, we'll get into some additional details there. Next slide. Okay, so recent successes. These are just a couple solicitations that should be familiar to a lot of folks here. We have our local rolling RFI that is rolling. It's always been open. We've brought in some great projects through it, including recently some much needed local resource adequacy projects, and we have a number of other projects that are under negotiation. We have our solar for our communities green tariffs. You may have also heard these referred to as DAC-GT and CGT. These are CPUC programs that we are program administrators of. This is being run by Tessa on our programs team. Really great to be working with her on this. We've had this solicitation open since August. Solicitation closes in February, and crossing our fingers that we get some good projects out of this. So these are two solicitations that we've really had running for a while now, which brings me to a new solicitation that we released in late October of this year. Really excited by this one. It's really set up to target these exact kind of infill procurement opportunities. It's really trying to cast a wide net. It's projects specifically in San Diego County, ranging from 100 kilowatts to 10 megawatts. So that's really a pretty big range, but even 10 megawatts doesn't really get close to the kind of PPAs that we're signing for our large utility scale transmission projects. So these are kind of all distribution interconnected. These proposals will be due end of this month, not too obnoxiously close to the end of the year, but December 22nd, and hope to bring some great opportunities to the board for consideration in January. Things that we are really focusing on, as well now, but really, first half of next year, we're gonna have this up to speed. One is a sort of comprehensive revamp of our feed-in tariff program. And just as a reminder, this sort of it's a different procurement mechanism where there's a sort of fixed, PPA rate that we're going to pay a developer to develop a project. There's kind of a standard contract. It's not really negotiable. Projects need to be, sized between, A and B and sort of fit within the bounds of feed-in tariff, but if they do, they're sort of assured a certain rate. Our plan is to really kind of expand that, make that more productive, bring in sort of some more projects. And so hoping to do that, hopefully we'll bring some recommended changes to that in Q1. And then continue to work with our member agencies to think of creative ways to leverage member agency properties that we can hopefully develop on. So working on sort of, I'd say, aggregating a list of potential sites for that probably won't really be until Q2 of next year that we have a list to present for consideration. And that could be, oh, we found 10 sites where we want to look at rooftops or parking lots for solar, or it could be, hey, we want to focus more on some energy storage projects, including energy storage as well. We may end up focusing on that partly due to these land constraints and sort of the challenges with using public lands for projects has been more challenging than I expected. Okay, well, nothing new here. Just wanted to sort of recap again, sort of the things that we're working on right now for local infill. We've got a number of solicitations currently active, feed-in tariff expansion and member agency collaboration in the first part of next year. I think this is a pretty robust and diverse strategy that will serve us well. That's it. I'll take any questions. Any questions?
Great. Thank you for the presentation. Deborah, do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no public comment requests on this item.
Great. I will now turn over to today's members for comments and questions. Member Harris.
Morgan, I wondered if you could talk for a minute about financing for these distributed energy resource projects. You think with the RFO that came out October and the other two programs, that feed-in tariff and the local member agency, is financing a challenge under these programs because of the size of the projects?
Well, I'll just say that our plans right now are to procure these similar to how we procure our large scale utility projects too. So we're just buying the energy. We're not playing any kind of role in the actual financing of the project. That would be completely up to the developers to finance the projects, if I'm understanding your question. And there's a chance, who knows, but don't quote me on it, but there's a chance that we may end up deciding someday to buy our own and finance our own assets, and that's not currently what we're about now.
Member Johns.
Yes, on the new local distributed RFO, what if the project, in other words, you're going to present a project and it's going to have a certain size, and so what is that goal in terms of dollars and total megawatts from end projects?
Yeah, when we released the solicitation, we wanted to, there was a number of reasons that we wanted to get as many sort of proposals in as we could. So we didn't kind of come in with a preconceived, okay, through this solicitation, we want to only procure this amount. A lot of us also, we want to get a lot of data points in, especially as we're thinking about rethinking our feed-in tariff and sort of, so what is that appropriate market rate? This will be a great source of a lot of price points for a lot of different projects, different sizes. I think we'll consider everything holistically. If everything's a dog, we don't need to take anything. We shouldn't. So I don't want to, but we're committed to doing at least a couple megawatts. But if everything's, if we get a bunch of projects and everything's tenable, then I think we should go for it.
Oh, well, sounds like the sky's the limit if they're all good. But yes, I have a couple more questions. I've always been interested in the feed-in tariff programs. And so you said you're going to increase the size, and I kind of forgot what it was. It was like maybe 15 megawatts.
Nelson
Before-
will keep me honest here, but I think our current feed-in tariff pilot is for projects up to 1 megawatt, and the
Yes.
program is a 6 megawatt cap.
6 megawatts? Okay,
Yeah.
good. So what's the new cap going to be?
Well, we don't, larger than that. I mean, part of what we're doing now in parallel is sort of just rethinking that, potentially gonna hire a consultant even to sort of help scope out, hey, what do feed-in tariffs in the state look like? What's been successful? What isn't successful? Since we, as a load-serving entity, really take infill procurement, I'd say uniquely seriously, like we really want to move the needle with it.
Yes, thank heavens.
Yeah, so I don't know what that number is gonna be now, but we want it to be a really meaningful procurement vehicle. So that's kind of a non-answer to your question, but
For some reason, I'm remembering that there's a, statewide CPUC limit of 3 megawatts for a feed-in tariff size. Is that, I'm not sure, this is a number I have seen before falling out of the air and I'm not sure where it came from.
I'm not sure about that off the top of my head. I feel like whenever I map out all the different rules and restrictions, it's busy and it seems like things sometimes conflict. That's partly why you might want to hire a consultant to help us sort of navigate those kinds of things.
Okay, and my final question is that you haven't got a lot of response to the feed-in tariff program so far, so it seems to me there's almost like a PR effort that might be required to interest parties that had, the kind of property that should be appropriate for a feed-in tariff to actually do this. Okay. Is there any PR? And I say PR, I guess that has sort of a derogatory connotation, but you have to generate interest.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that'll be part of our sort of outreach overall plan as well. I mean, I will say anecdotally, talking to a lot of other CCAs that have similar programs, and maybe they're not outreaching as well as they could as well, but for the other feed-in tariff programs that have similar pricing to ours, they're also not getting any engagement. So I think it's a different market right now, and price points that used to maybe pencil a few years ago don't currently. So I think a decent part of the explanation may be the price point as well as outreach as well.
So maybe you want to try to enhance the price point.
I would be surprised if that would be a likely outcome. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Price?
Is a landfill considered a brownfield?
I don't know. I think so.
I think so, but I'm not sure either.
Okay, we can catalog the question.
Well, thank you, Matthew. We'll catalog it.
Yes. Any other questions or comments?
One question.
Committee Member Emerson?
Yes, on the solicitation, the RFO solicitation in August 26th, I think, for the green tariffs programs. How do you know how many people were interested? Did they have to register with San Diego Community Power? Did you have a workshop where they asked questions?
Yeah, so we held at least three separate webinars for developers and other members. Anyone could join those webinars to learn more about solicitations and programs. But there's no sort of requisite registration at this point that folks could not have attended the webinar and are certainly welcomed and to submit an application before February. So we really don't have any teas yet as to like what response level will look like. I will say we did have a good number of developers attend our webinars for what that's worth and ask good questions. So but just hard to
numbers are like 10 or 12 or 20 or 30 or
10 to 12.
Yeah, for the three total. But you had several workshops.
Yes. call it 15 to 20 total for the three.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments? All right, this is a receive and file, so we'll move us along to regular item 6, update on energy education and online marketplace. I will now turn over to staff for the update.
Hello, good evening. I'll just introduce myself. My name is Nelson Lamelli. I'm a program manager with SCCP, and with me is
Victoria Brenica, she, her pronouns, program assistant.
and I'll turn it over to Victoria to give the presentation at the beginning, but I just wanted to start off by saying we wanted to bring this back as an update because a couple of months ago, committee member Carolyn Schofield mentioned at the end of the meeting the fact that we had these web pages up for energy and electrification education. And so we wanted to come back and provide a proper formal update on what we've been doing and working towards. And so I'll turn it over to Victoria to get us started.
Next slide, please.
So before we give an update on the new education web pages and our online marketplace, we wanted to take a few steps back and kind of explain how we got here. So from the community power plan, we learned that one of the short-term priorities and needs of our community was to have more customer energy awareness and education. And we also learned that they wanted to have a list of trusted and vetted contractors that they can receive bids and support from. Next slide, please. So before we started developing those programs, we wanted to have some goals set. So some of our customer education program goals, we wanted to make sure that all of our customers had actionable clean energy education. And we felt the best way to do that was by being a trusted source in the community. And we wanted to make sure that we were giving our customers reliable information. We wanted to make sure that it was timely and that it was something that was actionable, that they could make actions. And we wanted to make sure that this could help them transition to a clean energy future. Next slide, please. So through the evaluation, we looked at programs and offerings that were available throughout the state for customer energy education. One of those included the Switches On. The Switches On is a statewide effort that has helped over 2 million Californians understand energy education. And so we really used their website to help inspire the way that we created our Electrify Your Life webpage. We also looked at what other community choice aggregators were doing throughout the state. Most specifically, we looked at Silicon Valley Clean Energy's Energy Resource Hub, or EHUB for short. And when we looked more into that program, we learned and connected with them, and we learned that they had a request for proposal that they conducted in order to create that EHUB. So luckily, we were able to look through those and review those proposals and see what resources and tools we could use uniquely for our customers. So if we go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about that. So we created two energy education web pages. One is our Power Your Life webpage, and the other is our Electrify Your Life webpage. So this is what they look like. And then if we go to the next slide, I can go more in depth on our Power Your Life webpage. So we know that not all of our customers have a utility background or have like a big energy education knowledge. So we wanted to make something that was super easy for people to read and understand, something that was digestible. So at the top of the webpage, briefly, okay, this is what electrification is. If that's all our customers want to know, cool, now they know that. But if they want to know more about electrification, they have the option of clicking, what is electrification? And then they can be sent to our Electrify Your Life webpage. And maybe our customers already know more about electrification. They can click our soon to come marketplace, and they can see different upgrades or appliances that are available for electrification. And if they scroll a little lower on that page, there is an option to click and see our energy saving tips, which would save our customers energy, so energy conservation and save them money. And if we go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about our Electrify Your Life page. So this page is specifically to teach our customers or educate our customers on electrification. So at the top, just briefly explains this is what electrification is. And then we added little icons that go over some of the health, safety, economic, and environmental benefits of electrification. And then a little lower, if you scroll down on the page, it shows ways that folks can electrify like their lifestyles in their homes. And we wanted to make sure that this wasn't overbearing, it wasn't too text heavy or information heavy. So we wanted to make sure that it was super digestible, super easy to read, super easy to navigate. So we had icons. So if an individual wanted to learn more about the health benefits of electrification, they have the option of selecting the learn more, and they can see that information. We use that same concept with our Electrify Your Life lifestyle section. So if they wanted to learn more about cooking, they can see information on induction cooking. And then after they learn about that, they can click to go to our marketplace and see what induction stoves or cooking options are available to them. And the next slide talks about our marketplace that Nelson will be providing an update on.
Yes, thank you. So this is exciting for us. We have this marketplace that we have been working on, as Victoria mentioned. And so what this marketplace does is it allows our customers to get connected as a way to learn more about the different electrification technologies. And it's heavily focused around solar systems and energy storage systems as well. So we partnered with a firm called Electrum. So we selected Electrum from reviewing those responses that we got from the request for proposals that Silicon Valley had issued. And so we wanted to bring them on board because when we looked at their tool, there were a couple of things that really stood out to us. One of them was that their marketplace is super easy to use. It's super easy to read and understand. So that was important to us. Second of all is they offer a energy advisor so that customers aren't left alone floating in this arena of a marketplace. So that was super important for us because that way a customer kind of has their hand held throughout the process of installing solar, installing storage, or in this case, installing a heat pump water heater. And then third was that they also had, they maintain a list of vetted contractors and installers. So they have what they call their installer network. And so there's certain requirements that Electrum has for installers to join. And so we thought this was super important because that's something we've heard from the community when we were doing our community power plan. I know there's a little bit going on, was for customers wanting to see this trusted source of installers. And so I want to take a couple of steps. Can we go back a slide? And so I wanted to just kind of talk about that a little bit. Also, the next couple of slides are screenshots from the marketplace, so a little screen or a little preview, I should say. We're working on getting this marketplace up and running by the beginning of the year. And so this is super exciting for us. And I wanted to show that the screenshot you see on the side is what the landing page will look like. So from here, customers can input their address and it will look at their address and start generating some estimates for the different electrification technologies as well. So I'll walk through the rest of the marketplace previews, but I also did want to call attention to the fact that our landing page does have a way for local contractors to join the installer network below. So we wanted to make that easy. So if you go to the next slide, once you input a customer or anyone inputs their address or any address really within the service territory, they get presented with the three options of the different technologies available right now. If you hover over any of those options, you get presented with this list of I'm very interested, ready to buy, or just starting, or just learning. And this is a way for Electrum to know where the customer is in their journey, right? Are they just looking to play around with the tool right now, or are they ready to take that next step and install? So that happens with each of these. And so when you click on either one of them, wherever you're at, if we go to the next slide, it starts to generate estimates. And again, these are estimates, and then presents them in this dashboard. So in this case, I selected the solar system size, and then it generates all these things for me. So I can then toggle to add energy storage there or turn it off if I'm not interested in that. Everyone's interested in that, and play around with the tool, right? So you can look at different addresses, you can change what your average energy bill is, and all of these inputs adjust what the customer sees. And so, you know, for most customers, they can end there if they want. But if you want to get those customized bids and get that hand-holding experience from your energy advisor, you click that button at the bottom, says get customized offers. And so if we go to the next slide, that's when you get presented to create an account. And this is super important because that's how you get connected to that energy advisor. So when you create an account, it's super simple information that is asked. So like most accounts, it's asked for your name, your email, your phone number so that the energy advisor can contact you, and to create a password. Once you do that, if we go to the next slide, then you get presented with a calendar where you can select the appointment with your energy advisor. So this is when an energy advisor will be assigned directly to you to help you understand where you're at in your journey, or if you are ready to kind of take that next step. So let's say I confirm the date for this time around. We go to the next slide. But you can see on the right-hand side, I've been assigned an energy advisor now. So her contact information will be presented there, or their contact information, I should say, will be presented there. And then some of the estimated, and if you're ready to go take that step, you can upload your energy bill here so that you can get that truly customized bid. Or you can just say, I'll do this later. So if you're just kind of exploring this marketplace as well. If we go to the next slide, this is what the dashboard looks like at the end of the process. And so you can see the different projects, you can add projects, you can add different addresses to this as well. And you can kind of see how simple and easy and easily digestible this is for the customer and how much hand-holding there is. And that was really important to us. One of the reasons why we ended up selecting Electrum. And so I think if we go to the next slide, that's the end of the preview, but I did want to talk a little bit more about some of the promotions. So we're going to officially launch this at the start of the year. We felt that competing with the holiday season was probably not smart. We're not going to get as many eyeballs. So we decided to start the promotional activity for this in the new year. That promotional activity, thanks to our public affairs team, is going to include a lot of activities, including posting on social media, doing printed collateral at events, email campaigns. We're going to be mentioned in SCCP's upcoming newsletter, as well as adding this to our website as a banner so that people know that these pages and these resources exist. And so you can see some of the examples here that we are planning to run in the new year. And I think if we go to the next slide, that should conclude our presentation. Here are just some QR codes for anyone here and present or in the public to scan with their phone if they want to get connected, as well as the URLs that we have available. Let's do web pages. And with that, that concludes our presentation.
Great.
Before we take CAC comment and questions, Deborah, do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments requests on this item.
Thank you, Deborah. Questions and comments? Committee Member Sandoval.
I just have a few questions regarding accessibility of the websites. I did notice that the print is a little small and it's white on blue. Kind of had a squinting a little bit. I went onto the website and I was unable to find the language tab. How many languages do you guys have that available in?
For our page, yeah, I think I can answer that.
Sure. Thank you, Nelson. Hi, Jen LeBron, Director of Public Affairs. Our website can be translated using Google Translate in over 85 different languages. And we are working actively with translation services to provide other specific parts of our website to be formally translated into what we consider our other key languages. And so that includes Spanish, Arabic, Filipino, Vietnamese, and simplified as well as more complex Chinese.
Okay, so what about the visually impaired? Is there?
And so we've worked with our contractor Civilian to make sure that we have an accessible website. That way we have the correct ADA compliance as far as contrast goes for the key elements of our website.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Member Prince.
I have 3 questions. I don't know if I'm gonna remember all 3, but I'm gonna try. So we didn't do an RFP for this. We used somebody else's RFP and chose their list of who applied to their RFP.
Correct. We did that, and I forgot to mention that the reason we did that is that this marketplace is being provided to us at no cost.
I think you should have started with that, young man. Secondly, there are a number of programs out there, solar battery storage, EV charging stations, being done by nonprofits in certain geographical locations, as well as the city of San Diego and other locations. Will that be part of this stuff? So that people who can't afford a battery, but they may live in a certain specific area, will be able to get it free of charge or, drastically discounted, right?
Definitely, and it's not included right now as part of this, but that's part of the enhancements that we plan to make throughout the web page as well, is for those customers that do want to have access to those programs, the low income programs. So we want to make those aware through the different educational activities that we have, but it wouldn't be included as part of the marketplace at the moment, but they would be enhancements that we would make to the Electrify Your Life and Power Your Life pages.
And I don't think this was my 3rd one, but I came up with this one while you were talking. I had room for 3, so I'm gonna add this one in. And now I forgot it. No, I haven't.
So it's to give for library.
Yeah. Or not cussing and trying to find words not to cuss and forget stuff. This company that we're utilizing, where are they located and how familiar are they with the San Diego region as far as solar companies and the little person that you could get to be your advisor and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's I don't know the answer to your first question. I apologize in terms of like where they're located, but in terms of the familiarity with our local contractors, that is one thing that they are working really hard to build up that installer network. And why one of the reasons that we are also adding that installer network to our landing page is that we want our local contractors to join this marketplace as well. So that is definitely something that we want to promote as well, is to have them join the installer network. And they are also doing their own efforts to bring in more installer networks so that more people can get better.
Do you have any idea of what those processes are?
In terms of to join or what?
To acquire new installers and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I can't speak for what Electrum has been doing, but what we plan to do is promote the electrification, or excuse me, the installer network to our local contractors. And that is something that is going to be included as part of our marketing plan that we are working on with actively with Electrum as well to include that. I mentioned. It's all I know.
And so would the, that network include like subcontractors, trees and panel upgrades and, fixing, patching walls after a panel upgrade and all that kind of stuff?
Not for a panel upgrade, no, it would be specific to the solar, battery and heat pump water heaters.
So they'll be left after they cut a hole in somebody's house, it'll be up to whoever they can find. Because that's a pretty, the sub elements are as equally important as the actual element, right? If somebody goes in and installs a water heat pump, well, they're going to take out the water heater. Who's going to take out the water heater, right? If they do a panel upgrade, that requires doing stuff to the exterior wall that needs to be patched and matched and all that kind of stuff. Or if there's solar, somebody needs to cut the trees or the bushes or whatever. I think I would humbly suggest you kind of, or attempt to expand that network of, whatever they're called.
Providers.
Yeah, providers, expand it so that there's more access to, localized, installers and providers.
Okay, yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Anderson?
Yeah. Recent surveys show that 1 out of 5 American families are not online. And half of those are never online. 1 in 5 have nothing at home. And half of those don't even get it anywhere else on a phone or a library or whatever. So given that there's a fairly large percentage of people that don't have internet access, what's the default option for them to access these services through a phone network or whatever?
Yeah, so the difficult is like there is a phone number associated with the contacting electric as well, right? I think that the larger question is of how we contact the people who don't have internet access. That is something that is important to us, and that we within the program team have been evaluating like how do we reach those hard to reach customers, right? That don't have internet access. But that is something that we are considering and we need to continue to consider is how do we provide this information to those customers? But we didn't want to stop before providing it to them. And so we wanted to make this available for those that do have access to it right now.
So you're considering postcards and posters and TV ads and
that is all the within Jen's.
I'm happy to answer that question.
Yeah.
Nelson.
Okay, if you want to.
Yeah, sure. Happy to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are we gonna wrap a bus?
Great question. Something we're considering in next year's budget, certainly. But to answer your question, we've got about 37,000 households through the greater San Diego region that do not have internet access. Just a little fun factoid, I know from my time actually working for the city of San Diego and working with CMLS actually on a program called SD Access for All, which aims specifically at households that do not have the internet. So it's important as we continue our marketing efforts to further our relationships with trusted CBOs in particular, to make sure that we have printed materials that are available, with language access being at the core of that as well, to make sure that the hardest to reach populations still have an opportunity to take advantage of the programs and services that we offer. We're really excited about the opportunity to really ramp this stuff up as our programs team continues to push forward on all the good work that they've got started. So we're really looking forward to that and can't wait to come back when we have those materials ready for them.
Thank you.
And our public affairs team already created like a collateral on like energy saving tips, so they're already working on that. So
Nice.
just
Cool.
cool little thing.
Committee Member Caceres?
Thank you. Thank you, Nelson and Victoria and everyone who has worked on this. I'm really excited for the marketplace, and I think it's going to be super useful. My question is, this is geared toward homes. Is there going to be something similar geared towards businesses, or is it comparable enough that businesses could use this to get a good idea of what things might cost them? I'm wondering, because here in La Mesa we have a lot of small businesses that I want to electrify as soon as possible.
Yes, that's an excellent point, and this is entirely right now geared towards residential customers, and the business piece needs to come in next. I wouldn't say it would be comparable to use this. I think it would be a good way to kind of estimate potentially, but it wouldn't be a one-to-one comparable way to for businesses to estimate this. So that is the next piece that we are evaluating. Is one is like the residential, next is also the renters market. How do we tackle renters, and then also commercial customers? How do we provide information to them as well? And this goes to like a larger strategy that we're doing in terms of evaluating all our efforts and programs between customer classes. So more to come on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Community Emerson?
Yes, I know this is all under progress. You're working on everything. I did go to the website Electrify Your Life. I like those graphic. You have pictures for cooking, comfort through cooking, hot water, all those. That makes it easy. But when I click on it, it doesn't go anywhere, or it didn't go anywhere. Oh, well, now it's going somewhere. It didn't earlier. For when I do the cooking, it talks about induction cooking and explains some and market coming soon. I recommend that you already have a vendor promoting induction cooking as for testing. Why don't you put that on this link already and say, to start with, if you want to test it, go to, is it green
San Diego
Green Buildings? Why don't you put that on there right now? So there's something you can go to, rather than leave it just general contact, and just say that the market, more details are coming. But if you want to test it now, here's the way you can do it.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. So I'm glad we're doing this now, because we have a meeting tomorrow to talk about how we can make enhancements to this, and this is right at the top.
Very good. And then the other question is just, you're going to be having a list of installers or providers. They're going to be validated. They're not going to be fly-by-night people, but maybe you can come back later and explain how you're going to validate. These are good companies on the website later.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say that one of the things that I fought really hard with our partner Electron to do was to publish that criteria list on our website as well. So on that landing page, it will be included as well.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? All right. I'll close out with mine. I really appreciate this work and the program team focus on this very important opportunity. Not only does it help us, clean our air and provide more healthy infrastructure for our homes, it also helps build our business as an electricity provider. So that forward thinking is very important. I appreciate it. I think this model in particular is very interesting. It's something that I've seen in the private market typically is more focused and headed towards high income households, which I think, again, that's just generally where the market goes. I do think a lot of the questions that were elevated today will want to focus and direct that towards more low and moderate income households, so that this can be more accessible and this transition can occur hopefully from the bottom up rather than the top down. So I know that y'all have those values and you're set and focused on that North Star, and this is where we're going to have that starting point. So I know this discussion will continue, and I'm really excited by the work that's going on. Thank you. All right. Well, this is a receive and file, correct? Wonderful. Well, then I will move us on to item on our agenda tonight. Item 7, review of SDCP's conflict of interest and ethical conduct policy. I'll turn over to staff to provide the update.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, committee members. I'm Jen LeBron, the Director of Public Affairs. Today, I'm presenting on a proposed conflict of interest and ethical conduct policy that will go before the Board of Directors next week. Tonight, we are asking for you to formally recommend to the board to adopt this policy that will set the rules of conduct for our board, the Community Advisory Committee, and San Diego Community Power employees. Next slide, please. The goals of this policy center on ensuring that SDCP continues its progress to being one of the best governed and transparent public agencies in our region. This policy reinforces and reminds all who serve SDCP in their various roles about the responsibility of the public trust and our duty to provide high quality service in an impartial and fair manner. At the end of the day, we provide electricity and programs that power the lives of millions of people who live and work in our region. This policy aims to honor them by guiding all of us, board members, committee members, and employees alike, to be open, transparent, and responsible in our roles. Next slide, please. Ultimately, this policy summarizes the standards that are applicable to all who serve SDCP and goes beyond the requirements of state law in order to hold ourselves to a higher standard of transparency and fairness in our actions. While this policy is new to SDCP, it is not new for similar public agencies, particularly several of our member agencies, such as the City of San Diego. The highlights of this policy have been based on conflicts of interest policies that have been in place and legally vetted by other public agencies. There are 7 primary sections that lay out the responsibilities of board members, community advisory committee members, and employees. I'll provide a brief summary about each of these sections tonight, and the full policy can be found as an attachment in your meeting packets, both here in the chambers as well as online as part of the PDF for anybody who may be looking at this online tonight. Just as a quick note, the following slides will contain key excerpts from the policy itself. While I won't be reading those verbatim, I'm going to provide a brief summary of each of these sections just to highlight their importance. Next slide, please. The first section outlines the high-level responsibilities of public service in a very broad sense. It serves as a reminder to all who serve in our public agency that we are obligated to uphold the United States and California constitutions, as well as conduct ourselves in a way that prioritizes the public and the public good. Next slide, please. The second section dives into the general rules regarding conflicts of interest. It calls on directors, committee members, and employees to avoid engaging in any business or transactions that could conflict with our official duties or compromise independence or actions in our respective SDCP roles. Next slide, please. The third section goes into the acceptance of favors, gifts, and gratuities. All directors, committee members, and employees must comply with state law by disclosing financial interests and gifts in the Form 700 annually, as well as complying with all of their state laws in regard to receiving any kind of favors, gifts, or gratuities. This policy, however, goes a step beyond all of that by outlining that any gift that could be considered as influencing a director, committee member, or employee in the discharge of their duties should be returned or donated to a public charity. Next slide, please. The fourth section applies to SDCP employees specifically. It notes that any employee who would want to have outside employment or conduct outside business activities must provide notice and obtain department approval before doing so. In addition to that, any outside employment or business activity cannot conflict with an employee's responsibilities at San Diego Community Power. Next slide, please. Some of the activities that could constitute a conflict include using San Diego Community Power time, equipment, or assets to gain some form of advantage. And any outside business activity or employment that would cause an employee to miss work or impair their quality of work is also something that would be prohibited under these new policies. Next slide, please. The last section leads into a broader SDCP family, if you will, and it applies to all who serve. This policy prohibits the use of one's position for personal or outside gain, and it particularly notes that all who serve San Diego Community Power should not use their positions to secure unwarranted privileges for themselves or others. Next slide, please. And so this section is a quote from the document that specifically calls out all who serve San Diego Community Power and says they should not use their position to influence the review or approval of an SDCP contract, grant, or other decision for a director, committee member, or employee in their capacity as a private individual. Next slide, please. And so what does all of this mean in practice? We appreciate that we have subject matter and industry experts who have graciously provided their time and talents to bettering San Diego Community Power. It is also important for us to have a bright line that creates fairness and separation between opportunities for our subject matter and industry experts to weigh in on some items while separating themselves from opportunities that could be perceived as using their positions to benefit themselves or the organizations that they serve. Therefore, directors and CAC members will need to recuse themselves from the discussion or planning for grant and contracting processes, as well as recuse themselves from voting on items that pertain to any grant or contract that could relate to their work outside of SDCP. Next slide, please. The sixth section dictates the protection of confidential information, and that confidential information that may be gained in service to the SDCP should not be used for speculation or personal gain. This section also creates guidelines that bar favoritism and nepotism, as well as barring directors, committee members, or employees from soliciting campaign contributions from SDCP employees, as well as the prohibition of endorsing any products. Next slide. Finally, the last section really goes into the responsibilities and penalties for violating any elements of this policy. Ultimately, those who are found guilty or liable of those violations may be subject to censure or removal from their role, including termination for employees. The conflict of interest and ethical conduct policy is a big step for our young agency. Having this policy codified by our board of directors and followed by all who have made the choice to serve our fellow San Diegans in our roles will help solidify practices that promote transparency and fairness. I want to thank you all for taking the time to review the policy and request that you officially recommend the adoption of this policy by the board of directors. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have after public comment. Thank you.
Great. Deborah, do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no requests on this meeting.
So thank you. I'll now turn over to committee members for comments. Committee Member Johns.
Confidential information. If I get a memo, how do I know it's confidential or not?
If you have any questions in regard to any point in this particular document, we would recommend that you seek advice from our general counsel. So typically with a memo, it may actually be labeled as confidential. However, if there's any ambiguity over any part of this policy, it's a moment where we would turn to our general counsel, Nick, who's here tonight, and actually help write this policy for additional clarification.
So that section is, it's broadly written to apply to directors, committee members and staff, but really it's most relevant to employees and to directors who generally will be privy to confidential information. The CAC would not in the course of its duties. Generally, I can't really think of any situations in which you would, in the normal course of business, receive confidential information.
Are we being, sorry, are we being asked to sign a Form 700 now after this policy? I don't think we ever had.
It is not currently required of the committee. Essentially, the rule is when there's a new committee that doesn't have a history of showing influence on the board, it's not required that those committees file Form 700s. When the agency reviews every 2 years, SDCP, along with every other public agency, is required to review its conflict of interest code and designate code filers. That may be something that, based on the history of this committee, will be added during SDCP's next review, which I believe is next year.
So we may have to sign a Form 700 at some point.
Correct, but not currently required.
Correct. Thank you.
And just to follow up, Nick, it would probably be a good idea to have an item on the agenda where we ask, before the items are heard, ask the members of this committee if they want to recuse themselves from any item that is on the agenda due to this new policy.
Agreed. And if you, if anyone has questions, we always encourage you to reach out before meeting, contact staff, and they can bring our office in if you have any questions ahead of time. I'll just be candid and say, generally, if it's 5 minutes before a meeting and someone comes up and says, do I have a conflict? The general answer will be, out of an abundance of caution, I will say yes, because it's usually to take time to look at something, unless it's very, very cut and dry. But so we do encourage you to give as much time as you know you may have an issue, just to allow us to try and help you participate if you can.
Any questions or comments? Okay, right.
Yes, when I worked at Caltrans, we had to fill out a Form 700, so I'm familiar with that and the general concept of conflicts of interest. But as you were reading that, it made me think of Electron, who's providing this marketplace for free. How do they benefit? Do they have a conflict of interest for what they're doing? So maybe you have to investigate and explain, come back to us later, that they don't have a conflict of interest. We want them to do it in an honest, straightforward way that benefits everybody. But I think that's something that we have to make sure that they themselves don't play favorites with the vendors.
Thank you for that commentary there. We do have a contract in place with Electrum that goes into some of those details about how certain vendors are chosen and what have you. And so that is outside of this particular conflict of interest and ethical conduct policy, but we appreciate you bringing that to our attention.
I got a quick one.
Anderson?
How does this apply to political activity? For instance, if you were on an interview committee for an organization and you were to ask a candidate if they supported San Diego Community Power or CCAs in general, and then you recommended against that candidate, they gave the wrong answer, would that be a conflict of interest?
I'll defer to Nick to answer that question.
I'm not quite certain I see how a conflict would arise in that situation here at SDCP.
Well, because we're vested, at least if not financially in our case, certainly in terms of time and intellectual commitment to San Diego Community Power. So we would have, that would give us an inherent bias toward candidates that favored us. But that wouldn't create a conflict of interest.
It would not. No, generally, the typical rule is that if your financial interest is in an interest in the government agency itself, even if you receive a stipend from them, it doesn't count your salary or reimbursements as a financial interest that would sort of count against you in that type of situation.
Okay. And I would just like to add that as far as political activity is concerned with this particular policy, it's really looking more at utilizing San Diego Community Power resources during work hours or using one's work time to participate, which is prohibited. But after hours on one's own time, as part of really an individual's rights to participate in our democracy, that this policy does not touch that piece.
Very good. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, I will now turn it over for
we want to recommend.
yeah, so that's the next part.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll now turn over to the committee members for a motion.
Oh.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You'll be cheerleader.
I make a motion, we approve this.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Committee Member Price and a second by Committee Member Castaneda. Deborah, can you please call a vote?
Committee member Scandival. Aye. Excuse me. Committee member Schofield. Committee member Sclafani.
Could you use your mic, please?
Committee member Sclafani.
Aye.
Committee member Johns.
Aye.
Committee member Hammond.
Aye.
Committee member Sandoval. Aye. Committee member Webb. Secretary Casares.
Aye.
Committee member Castaneda. Aye. Committee member Emerson.
Yes.
Committee member Price.
Yeah.
Committee member Anderson.
Aye.
Vice Chair Harris.
Yes.
Chair.
Aye.
Thank you.
Of course. All right.
That motion carries.
Great. And motion passes. Really much appreciate it. All right, I'll move us to regular agenda item 8. Update on 2024 rate and power charge and different adjustment projected changes. Wow. I'll turn over to staff to provide an update. I love PCA.
Be gentle with us, man. Be gentle with us.
Good evening, Chair Vasilakis and the members of the Community Advisory Committee. My name is Ethan Sputo. I'm the Senior Director of Analytics and Customer Operations. alongside my colleague.
My name is Aaron Liu. I'm the fairly new senior rates and strategy analyst. Super happy to be here.
Awesome. Tonight we'll be presenting on the update to the 2024 rates as well as the power difference adjustment changes for the upcoming year. Next slide, please. So tonight we'll give you a quick journey of the 2023 and the 2024 rates timeline. We'll also preview our rate setting process overview, broadly speaking, 2024 rate setting mechanics. We'll also give you a quick sneak peek of the 2024 commodity rate projections, as well as the next steps for SDCP as an organization. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Aaron to walk us through our presentation tonight.
Again, super happy to be here. Before I jump right into the presentation, I just want to table set. We'll talk about starting with the timeline. But I also want to just make a mention that all of the tables and the figures you're going to see are illustrative. So they are projections from SDCP, so nothing is final, and we're still kind of working on the final rates. Okay. So let's start with the timeline. As you can see on this slide, really the bookends in the beginning of each year and the end of each year, there's kind of the rate setting process. Where we are right now is bringing updates to the committee as well as to the board. And on January 1st, SDG and E will be implementing their 2024 rates, and we will be working in parallel to bring rate recommendations to the board on January 18th to be effective in February. Next slide, please. So in terms of the overview, these are the guiding objectives. Just as a reminder that SDCP's rate development policy was adopted on November 17th, 2022. The objectives and general criteria are listed here. I'm not gonna go through them, but a lot of it are related to cost recovery, cost competitiveness, as well as addressing equity, which we will come back to later. Slide, please. So let's jump into a little bit more in terms of the rate components of SDCP's rate. So the different cost components include generation, the power charge indifferent adjustment, or known as PCIA, franchise fees, as well as SDP's delivery components. So the top table to the right here shows the different components of SDCP's residential time of use rate compared to SDG's rate. This table can also be found on SDCP's website. So the PCIA rate is set annually and includes the above market costs related to utility procurement made before customers were enrolled into CCAs and left utilities. The second graphic on this slide on the right bottom really breaks down at a high level how the PCIA is calculated by subtracting the portfolio value from the portfolio cost. The franchise fee is collected from all customers for the non-exclusive right of SDG system in public streets and highways. And again, as a reminder to be competitive, the board approved a 3% discount in rates for SDCP customers compared to SDG customers in the last rate setting cycle. So equity is really at top of mind and a very important objective in terms of our rate setting and rate development policy. So to kind of include that as part of the process, let me define equity versus equality, just for good measure. So equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. In contrast, equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. So the bottom left illustration here really provides a good example of the difference between equality and equity. So what we've done in the past is either bifurcate or trifurcate our rates. That means we've been moving forward with 2 sets of rates or 3 sets of rates. So mirroring the graphic to the left, the graphic to the right is a illustrative example when we are looking at SDCP's trifurcated rates. So when you see that when the rates are trifurcated, the value proposition is balanced across all customers. So looking at the pictures next to each other provides a very kind of clear example where we want to go. Again, this trifurcation will maintain a fair, equitable, and balanced rate structure that does not create winners and losers across our customers. Just providing a little bit more on trifurcation or another way to look at it. SDCP enrolled customers at different times, and those customers are assigned different PCIA with corresponding resource vintage years. So the customers will have the same commodity generation rates and franchise fees, but different PCIA rates depending on what phase they were enrolled in. So please take a look at the table and the graph here as an example where you will see that the customers have the same commodity rate, the same franchise fees, but different PCIA rates because of their different vintages. So the really takeaway here is that to maintain a fair discount for all customers across the board, 3 sets of rates must be developed. So we talked a little bit about the timeline as well as the process and objective. So we'll finally get to a sneak preview of what rate projections may look like. Again, these are illustrative based on SDG&E filings. So SDG&E filed its 2024 sales forecast, or the ERA that we've heard about before. In May of this year, they filed an update in October, and then in 2 weeks after that, they filed another update in November. I just want to note that there were significant changes between each of those updates, so there is still a lot of uncertainty regarding where rates may go. Right now, rates are projected to decrease across all customer classes with an average approximately 70% across the system, as you can see in this table. SDG&E states that in their ERA application that the main reason that the rates are expected to drop in 2024 is they're forecasting decreasing in procurement of power. Another driver may be adjustment in SDG&E's balancing accounts, as well as actualization of forecasts in their balancing accounts. So in terms of next steps, our team and staff will continue to monitor updates from both SDG&E as well as the Commission to develop and set 2024 SDCP rates. From the sneak preview, SDG&E commodity generation PCIA rates will be finalized at the end of December. So the rates will come out, I believe, right before the holidays. And in January 2024, staff will recommend 2024 rates to the board for adoption. While we move towards that January date, items to consider includes recommending continuing to trifurcate rates to achieve equity. Projected SDG&E rates at this moment is expected to decrease. And then, of course, final SDG&E and PCIA rates will ultimately determine where SDCP 2024 rates will come. That concludes our presentation.
What does PCIA stand for?
Great. Power charging difference adjustment.
All right. Thank you, staff. Deborah, do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no requests on this item.
Thank you so much, Deborah. We'll now turn over to committee member comments. Committee member Price.
Who checks the rates that SDG&E gives us? Projected rates. We're projecting those to go down. Who's projecting those to go down by 17%? Us or them?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. The projections are actually based on SDG&E's actual filings with the commission. So in other words, SDG&E is required to file the ERA the one that you just heard from Laura earlier. And
$100 million one?
exactly that one. And essentially whereas we're not under the jurisdiction of the CPUC in terms of our rate setting, rate making ability, SDG&E is, similar to the other investor owned utilities. In other words, they have to file their revenue requirements, their forecasts, et cetera, with the commission. And that's the piece that Aaron just essentially previewed.
And so we intend to be 3% below their projected rate or their real rate?
No, so in other words, what Aaron was saying is the trajectory of the 2024 rate landscape is such that SDG&E will reduce their commodity or the bundle commodity rate. And for us, in order for us to essentially embark on our rate setting process, right, we have to await the power charge and difference adjustment finalization for 2024 because we have to factor it in to the rate design as it was previewed, I think, in slide number 4.
And we're assuming that's going to be lower also because of their error.
No, so whereas for the last rate cycle, so in 2023, there were actually negative PCI values. We're not seeing that for 2024 in the latest filing by SDG&E in November. Every single PCIA vintage charge that our customers will be exposed to is projected to be a positive. However, there are material deltas between the 3 PCIA vintages that our customers are essentially falling under. And that's the reason why for Aaron, he's saying trifurcation of rates, meaning, and please, if you can go back to the, I think maybe slide number 5. Right there, sorry, no, 2 more. So right there or there, you can see that even though this is an illustration, the SDG&E commodity rate is the same, right? But the PCIA values are different. One was a negative, one is a positive, and one is a positive, but they're all different. And so if we do not trifurcate these rates, right, we are essentially going to create rates that are structurally different across the various points in time that our customers were enrolled into our service, and that would defeat the equity objective that we have.
Okay, I don't understand what you just said with it. Okay.
Well,
that's good, buddy.
The offline.
Please.
Absolutely.
Member Johns?
I seem to recall previous years where SDG&E files for rate changes multiple times during the year. And it's also my impression that SDCP sets their rates February 1st and never changes them. And it seems to me that SDG&E can engage in gamesmanship of lowering their rates, which because we offer a value proposition that influences what we set rates at, but then we're stuck with it while they increase their rates with mid-year filings. And I'm just wondering if you have any comment about if what I'm picturing there is incorrect in any way.
So while we cannot speak for SDG&E's processes, I think for us as an organization, rate stability is also one of our core objectives as defined in our rate development policy that the board approved. And so to the greatest extent possible, we will propose one rate change in a calendar year, even though, there could be instances where intra-year rate adjustments may be recommended, but we haven't had to do that. So I don't want to speak for SDG&E's processes, but I can definitely confidently speak about the need of rate stability simply because that's what we hear from our customers, right? When a customer, when customers plan and budget, they take into account the fact that they would prefer to have stability. And as long as, that rate stability does not impede on our financial, fiscal, responsibilities, then I think the SDCP as an organization and the board and our board is essentially signaling the fact that, rate stability is one of our core objectives in our rate setting policies.
Committee Anderson?
I also just want to add briefly, any SDGs requested changes in terms of rates as well as their projections and their filings are vetted through a formal engagement process. So we, along with other local CCs, participate in that process to thoroughly vet what they file as well as what they're requesting for, as well as other advocacy groups such as Public Advocates Office, as well as different agencies. So
Yes, I have advocated with people I interact with on behalf of San Diego Community Power. I often tout the fact that basic rate for SDCP is lower than SDG. Is it going to be one of your goals this year, despite their 17% projected reduction, to still try to match that to keep the rates lower so we don't lose customers?
That's an excellent question. I think, again, these are projections, right? And as Aaron mentioned, between the October update and the November update, we saw a material swing. So who knows what the rates will be come 1/1/2024. And that's the reason why I think in our presentation, it was really important for us to say, we are keeping a very close eye in terms of the consolidated filings that SDG&E has to do in December. Again, the CPUC meeting is next Thursday, after which they will consolidate everything that is out there into one advice letter that will give rise to the rates that will become effective on 1/1/2024. And that filing actually is not expected to roll out. I think we've heard it's going to come out on December 29th, so right before the new year. And Aaron and I will be super busy going through it to make sure that, we have a good enough understanding of what it entails, simply because that will set the tone as to what the staff recommendation will be for our 2024 rates to the board.
Mr. Harris?
Yes, I just wanted to ask about what role reserves for SDCP will play in the rate setting. I recall last time around, the board was presented with two different value propositions, and building up the reserves for the organization was considered a key factor.
That's an excellent question. I'll start my comments, then I'll pass it over to Aaron to add. In terms of the reserve building, I think, fiscal prudence is also one of our core tenets of our rate setting process. And so we will definitely take a whole look, or a holistic look, in terms of not only equity, not only competitiveness, but also fiscal prudence as a part of the calculus in terms of what staff will recommend to the board. But yes, I think generally speaking, we want to be here for the long haul, not only in 2024, but for 100, if not 150 years. And we have to do that analysis, right? It's still, even though we do have these projections, they're not set in stone until they're set in stone.
Member Sando? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Lucas. Just, to add briefly, one of the first slides is kind of looking at the goals and priorities of the rate development policy. It's really the balance act of how to in or achieve all of those at the same time, right? So kind of weaving the two questions together is we're talking about cost recovery and reserves and balancing that with rate competitiveness and customer value. So it's everything we take a look at as we kind of get into the rate setting.
Thank you. Committee Member Sandoval?
I'm not too familiar with the lingo, so I just want to confirm if I'm understanding correctly. So you're saying if SDNG drops the rates, San Diego Community Power will drop the rates. And there's forecasted no other way that San Diego Community Power can drop rates.
No, so I think SDG&E has their own revenue requirements. We have our own revenue requirements. We have our costs that aren't sometimes necessarily aligned with SDG&E's costs. And so from our rate development policy objective, right? I mean, at the bare minimum in our rate setting, we have to recover our costs, right? So that is one. We definitely have reserve targets that have to be realized because that's also codified in terms of what the board has approved for us to do. But we also want to remain competitive, right? So as Aaron was saying, the rate setting process is not myopic. In other words, we have to look at it holistically, essentially hitting all of those policy objectives and making sure that at the end of the day, we can remain competitive, right? While also remaining fiscally prudent.
Gotcha. So that's what's providing the wiggle room right now.
Correct. And again, in terms of the competitiveness factor, as Aaron previewed in the presentation, that is directly hinged upon the power charging difference adjustment.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, Anderson.
Just a commodity. I get confused. I don't know why by the term commodity. When I get my bill, there's either the grid side or the generation side. So when you say commodity, which is it? And then you say bundled commodity, which is what is that? And then the last part of just at 17%, I thought I heard the phrase it's going down because there's a decrease in purchase power. I didn't understand what you were saying. So come back to that at the end. But can you explain commodity? What commodity are we talking about?
Commodity is equivalent to generation.
Just generation.
Yeah. So power commodity generation.
When you say bundled commodity, that's the same thing as commodity?
So bundled would be customers that SDG&E serve, and unbundled customers would be customers that departed SDG&E's service.
Yeah, I think just to add additional context, and I think we use these terms sometimes, right? All the time. But a bundled customer is a customer that gets both the transmission and delivery service as well as the generation commodity service, meaning they're getting the electrons as well as the transmission and delivery service, all those electrons to their premise. Whereas an unbundled customer, right, that would be a customer that is getting the transmission and delivery service, but not the electrons. Like somebody else is responsible for purchasing the electrons, and that somebody else can be a CCA such as SDCP, or it can be a direct access provider. And so when we say bundled and unbundled, that's what we mean. But in our case here, when we say unbundled, it means a CCA customer, meaning a customer that SDCP is serving from just the commodity, the electrons.
But this
transmission and delivery.
And then this back to the 17%, that's based on the commodity, which is the generation of the electricity, not the grid part.
Correct. But that would be inherent to just SDG&E.
And suppose
the 17% reduction that Aaron talked about, that is specific to commodity as it was provided by SDG&E, not SDCP.
And the commodity is the generation part. Correct. And again, what was the reason for supposedly this decrease? What was the
SDG&E is projecting lower procurement costs, so they're
projecting
lower procurement costs.
They're projecting lower procurement costs.
And the reason is because a lot of customers came to us, or the price of electrons has went down.
I don't want to guess the reason. They don't put that in their plan.
Remember, Anderson?
Well, we have lower procurement costs as well.
That's an excellent question. I think it is possible and likely. Again, we've already started looking at a variety of different variables in terms of what our projected procurement cost would look like in 2024, but it's still early. We will definitely come back in January with a more definitive, much more robust, well-calibrated response.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, this is receive and file, correct? All right, well, I'll move this on to regular agenda item 9, updates from programs and community equity ad hoc committees. So I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Harris and Member Emerson to provide this update. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start. The Community and Equity Ad Hoc Committee met in December to continue providing suggestions and recommendations around the 2024 CAC work plan update, which included identifying program-specific activities and strategies to increase meeting participation and connect residents to resources from our member agencies. Staff also shared December tabling and volunteering opportunities that all CAC members are welcome to take part of, and members suggested areas and events that staff could be present at. Our next meeting of the subcommittee will be Monday, January 8th, 2024. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Member Emerson?
Yes, we just had our meeting yesterday. The next meeting would be in January 3rd, Wednesday, January 3rd, 2024. We had a great presentation from Emily and Colin about the solar battery storage program that they're working on that would help establish the rules and the funding and how it would work. The goal is to have 50% of those programs benefiting communities of concern. There are just a lot of things involved with what they were doing. It took them a long time to put the package together and the concept. And as I was mentioning that we need a big diagram on a wall that kind of go down through all the options and how it would work to make it easier for everybody to understand. Maybe they'll come up with a way to, rather than individual slides. I don't know if that's possible, but yeah, they had programs that would work for just people on the care or lower income area, and also people who are not on those programs that have different benefits and incentives. So those are all exciting things that we hope will come to fruition. And the one comment I think that I had made is that we want to see in all of our districts some pilot projects and implementation. We want to accelerate these efforts and learn what works or doesn't work. But all of our districts, we want them to be able to benefit. So we encourage the staff to look for those opportunities and to keep us involved and get our feedback on how it's working in our district. But otherwise, we're just excited to see what they're working on, and we definitely want to support what you're doing and make it successful.
Thanks. Deborah, do you have any public comment on this item?
There are no requests.
Thank you, Deborah. I'll turn over to the committee for any comments or questions. No comments or questions. All right, receive and file, thank you. We'll move on to regular agenda item 10, update on CAC work plan update progress. I'll turn it over to Xiomara Crespo to present this item.
Good evening, committee. My name is Xiomara Crespo, and I will keep this short and sweet. So since early November, staff has leveraged the formation of the Community and Equity Ad Hoc Committee to discuss revisions to the fiscal year 2022-2023 CAC work plan that are representative of what the CAC has expressed interest in monitoring, discussing, and taking action on. In anticipating this process and concurrent to revisions to the work plan, staff is working with members to revise the CAC scope of work for board approval in January 2024. Proposed changes to the work plan specifically include changing the time frame from fiscal year to calendar year, clarifying strategies to better track collective progress, such as specifying educational presentation and identifying program-specific opportunities for activities, Creating information sharing protocols to activate member advocacy and dispel inaccurate information across the communities that we serve, and adding a civic engagement and participation focus under which members would explore and develop ways to increase participation in meetings, connect citizens with resources from member agencies, leverage their own networks from the benefit of a CCP, and create an SCCP, CAC member, and volunteer recruitment pipeline, seeing that a lot of the positions will be coming due soon. So we welcome feedback from members on these proposed changes ahead of our January 2024 formal item that we'll bring forward to this committee and the board for approval. And I am happy to answer any questions.
Great. Deborah, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments.
Well, any questions from community members? Comments? Member Jones?
On the change from fiscal to calendar year. I remember we changed from calendar to fiscal early on because when our terms start. I'm just trying to decide if for any reason that would be a problem, but actually I don't think it is. I was just wondering if you had any comment on considering that when you considered the change.
I appreciate that. And there will be ample opportunity for you to think through it and share feedback with me. This item will come for full discussion in January. So if you wanted to discuss any potential additions, feel free to reach out to me directly.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll move on. Thank you so much, CEO. And another one for item, regular item, agenda number 11.
Last but not least, my name is Xiomara Crespo, Community Engagement Manager, with the last item on the agenda today, which is the approval of the 2024 CAC regular meeting calendar. The CAC, as you all know, is a Brown Act committee, which dictates that all meetings shall be posted and held in public settings. Meetings are held in person for CAC members and members of the public. Under certain circumstances, however, CAC members may also attend and participate in the meeting virtually pursuant to Brown Act rules. As a convenience to the public as well, and in compliance with teleconferencing rules, as CCP provides a call-in option and intranet-based option for members of the public to virtually observe and provide public comment at its meetings. All of our meetings are also recorded and posted to our website. During the second half of the 2023 calendar year, the CAC met every second Thursday of the month at 5:30 p.m. right here at the City of San Diego's Metropolitan Operations Complex, or MOC2 for short, and unless otherwise noted. And this was also the meeting location for the Board of Directors. The CAC typically meets 2 weeks prior to the Board of Directors meeting taking place to allow staff to appropriately communicate CAC discussions and direction to the board. And for this time around, staff is proposing to continue with this meeting schedule and site for the 2024 calendar year with a meeting recess in August 2024, like we did this year. Other alternatives may be considered during today's discussion, but the proposed dates are actually on the screen. And I'm happy to answer any questions and entertain discussion. Thank you.
Great. Deborah, do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no requests.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from CAC members? Secretary Kassar. Sorry.
Thank you. For my work schedule, we already have events for next year. And so if we do continue with these dates and the time of 5:30, there are already two, the I believe February date and the November date that I will not be able to attend. But that is based on both the date and the time. So if there was any flexibility on time, that would be a conversation I would definitely be interested to have. If not, those would have to be my absences for next year. So just wanted to bring that up since I already know that event schedule.
Thank you. Member Anderson?
This is marginally relevant to this, but we have staggered terms, right? So some of us are in our first year and some in our second year. When are our terms up?
This information is easily accessible on the website, technically because there were staggered terms. There were 2 members per member agency, one of which their first term was 2 years. And they had a possibility or an opportunity to continue their terms, which meant that they would go on to serve a second term of 3 years. So I believe that a lot of the terms are coming up soon and technically 2025.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Marissa?
I noticed that the March 14th date is near St. Patrick's Day. Will we be required to wear green? Does that mean?
Yeah.
Drink green beer.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, and I think Secretary Casares will have conversations with staff about any accommodations that we can make. Great. All right, well, no further questions or comments. We'll now call a motion, or I'll call for a motion to approve this calendar and schedule. I'd like to move.
So moved.
Member Anderson, who's a second? Oh, Committee Member Castaneda. We have a motion by Committee Member Anderson, second by Committee Member Castaneda. Deborah, can we please call a roll vote?
Committee Member Schofield. Committee Member Sclafani.
Aye.
Committee Member Johns.
Aye.
Committee Member Hammond.
Aye.
Committee Member Sandoval.
Aye.
Committee Member Webb. Secretary Casares. Thank you. Committee Member Castaneda.
Aye.
Committee Member Emerson.
Aye.
Committee Member Price.
Yeah.
Committee Member Anderson.
Aye.
Vice Chair Harris.
Aye.
Chair Vascolaskas.
Aye, thank you.
That was close.
I don't care. I never do. I never do. Believe me. Thank you. All right, that motion is approved and we're done for today.
Can I ask a question? Is San Diego Community Power having a Christmas party?
Oh. My boss answered that question.
Our COO is here. He ought to be in charge of the.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. We do actually have one last thing.
We are having a holiday.
Is the CAC invited and will we be notified?
No, they're not invited.
Not my knowledge, no.
Okay. So we're gonna crash it.
All right, let's close out with our last item. We'll now move to standing items, discussion of potential agenda items for Board of Directors meeting. As a reminder, the CAC may bring items to the attention of the board in 2 ways. 1, through CAC reports submitted to the board, and or 2, as a discussion item during a board meeting with the approval of the CEO and the chair of the Board of Directors. Do any of our CAC members have recommendations on potential items for our Board of Directors? No recommendations. Thank you for your recommendations, or no recommendations. Let's move on to committee member announcements. Committee member announcements. Do any of our CAC members have any items that they'd like to share? Alrighty, seeing none, that brings us to the end of our agenda, and I appreciate your participation. We'll be adjourned until our next, sorry.
I was gonna do a 10-second announcement.
Oh, yes, of course. Thank you. Remember.
We have Hammond Climate Solutions Foundation has funding for grants for schools or youth-based organizations. And so I know there's interest in electrification. If anyone's interested, we're happy. We don't take a cut. We're happy to volunteer to help get more local schools to have solar. So just throwing that out there.
Excellent. Thank you.
Oh, I was just pointing out that.
Oh, Terry. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Any other announcements? All right, well, we are adjourned until our next regular meeting on January 11th next year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.